Before we go into the world of SmackDown, by popular demand, as they say, or they used to say, nobody demands anything popularly anymore. But nevertheless, we watched an NXT match from the Big Show. What was the Big Show last weekend?
I think it was Battleground.
The Battleground. Well, we watched one of the Battleground matches because everybody was talking about it and wanted us to check it out and take a look at it.
There's literally footage of fans at the AEW pay-per-view event watching this on their phone at the pay-per-view event.
Yes, and they were the smart ones. What's Donovan Dijak? His name in Ring of Honor was Dijakovic, which sounds even more Polish. I wish they'd have kept that, but nevertheless, Donovan Dijak and our old friend Ilja Dragunov. And remember, I think you loved too. We all loved. Love was in the air. The matches from a couple of years ago with Walter, formerly Walter, now Gunther, and Ilja Dragunov. One was at one of the NXT pay-per-views or big events. Another one I still have on my DVR, that one episode of NXT from like 2 years ago with that match. And I said at the time, why can't this be what modern wrestling is instead of the fucking Jolly Jokers, right? So anyway, we took a look at that match. Brian, you watched that match, did you not? This match with Ilja and Donovan, and I did too. And let's just talk about it for a second.
And I have to say, the response was pretty surprising. I hadn't heard too much about this match going into it. I hadn't heard really anything at all. And then as soon as it happened, the Cult of Cornette Facebook group, Twitter, emails, tons of requests that Jim has to watch this match.
Well, and like I said, that's popular demand by the majority rule that we are governed by around here. And again, both of these guys, they get it. They're not doing a 1970s headlock takeover scientific wrestling match. It's modern style, but at the same time, it's not phony. It's not silly. They've got facials. They show aggression. They're hitting hard in safe places. In all honesty, was not thrilled at the stipulation because it was a last man standing match, and that means they get to use furniture too. But it wasn't a garbage match. They weren't setting furniture up for stunts to go and climb to the top and jump off and they were fighting with the furniture and or trying to hit each other with things, and it was limited. And when they did something with some blunt instrument, they sold it. And it was a struggle. And I thought, again, a billionaire can sign all these little soft little fucking buckaroos and their grade school friends, but can't get somebody like this that I know they're on national TV with NXT, kind of, sort of, about at the level that AEW is, but the NXT guys are not focused on as far as the level of the main roster guys. So these guys could be brought to a new environment and they could be serious pro wrestlers. They don't, they're going to get penalized in the WWE probably because I can't see Ilja, acting like fucking Monsue or Mansoor or the male models or whatever. They'll probably fuck them up some kind of way. But if there was a modern wrestling promotion focusing on serious athletic wrestling, these are two of the guys you would want. Anyway, the body language. You can believe Ilja's nuts because of his face. And they took some dangerous looking bumps and they were really stiff, but I didn't see anything that was reckless or unprofessional. The kendo stick I could have done without, but at least they worked it real, again, instead of an AEW type of clown show weapons match where they, just go from one thing to the other. And honestly, I say that the weapons, sticks, and stairs and et cetera is the biggest thing wrong with modern wrestling because it's way past overdone in all of these indie garbage matches. But if it had been on a limited basis over the last 10, 15 years, whatever the case, done in this kind of context with this kind of match that these guys had and sold everything and did it judiciously somewhat, it would still mean something. Because right now it just tells you, well, they're doing the same shit everybody else does. But these guys weren't really. It's just the visual. When people see garbage in the ring now, they think that's what wrestling is. And they just, I think that's why a lot of people just flip past it. But anyway, so having said that, maybe if NXT I thought we see Pretty Deadly. We see Grayson Waller. We see that tub of goo Joe Gacy. And that's why we haven't been watching the fucking thing. So we've been sleeping on these guys because of their environment. And that's why I say if you got these guys in an environment where everybody up and down the card, guys like them, you had Gunther's and you had fucking, the people that we have acknowledged have halfway clue about what's going on about the wrestling business and want to be serious about it, then these guys would be stars in that environment, I believe.
Did you see Dijakovic walking to the ring? Because he turns to, the commentators tell us his family's there, and there's a woman holding a baby against the barricade, but he's not looking at them. He's looking at what appears to be a fan, and then he releases this, again, we don't know what he's doing on that show, this Batman voice, and he's like, "Get the kid out of here!" and it caught me off guard. I just started laughing, and then I rewound it and watched it again. He's not even looking at the family. He's looking at some other guy.
Well, I got to be honest, I skipped the entrances because I always do on WWE productions, but maybe he didn't want him to show his fucking family. He's like, God damn it, I'm a fucking heel, whatever.
What did he say? It was like, take them out of here. He said something. They gotta go. I forget what he said, but it cracked me up.
Oh, and I forgot, Ilya won with a flying forearm to the back of the head, crashing him onto a chair face first. And because there's a size difference, so that was a good way to beat the big man. But with Ilya, again, he neutralizes a lot of the size issue because even though he's smaller, he's so tough, so stiff, and just so committed, you think he's nuts.
His facial expressions are what will save him, and his body language, not just his face, but, he's a smaller guy, but he looks like a tough, smaller guy in a competition, in a fight.
Yeah.
Like, you believe his face, even without the blood from whatever happened to his chin, you believe that this guy's in a struggle, and it works. We've seen him lose matches, and it didn't take anything away from him.
Now, he gets over when he gets beat, because the effort is so remarkable.
You know who Dijak reminded me of, just body type-wise? And it's not a perfect comparison. Imagine if late-era Killer Kowalski was in better shape. Like, in shape for these times.
Yeah.
Because he's like very tall, but he's not, not thick like a young Killer Kowalski. He's more like a late era, or a late period Killer Kowalski.
The late Killer Kowalski. Along about the lightning bolt tights and... Yes, and the kind of lean vegetarian figure.
And then you add in the Batman voice, and it's a winning thing.
Walter didn't sound anything like Batman, though. He was so, I'll tell this and we'll move on. This will be more interesting than SmackDown. So Killer Kowalski, as everybody knows, was one of the biggest stars in the history of the business, with the classic ring name. And from the time that he debuted, because he was 6'7", legitimately, and like 265 with a bodybuilder physique in the late 40s. So nobody looked like that in the country at that time. And then...
He was Tarzan Kowalski.
He was Tarzan Kowalski at first, because he was, that was the hot movie series, The Man of the Jungle. And he got the killer when he knee dropped Yukon Eric's ear off. But then he became a vegetarian. late in the 50s, and he had been one of the biggest stars in the business and in demand everywhere and on top in St. Louis and this and that. And then he just gets out of the business for like a year and a half, becomes a vegetarian, drops all this weight. But then he came back, and through the 60s and 70s, he was still one of the biggest names in the business, right? Even though he had the leaner build, his cardio was incredible. He never stopped coming at you. He had the great, growly type interview. But so that's the 60s and 50s and 60s and 70s. So I'm in the WWF. I started in 93. And at that time, Walter, everybody's Uncle Walter, Killer Kowalski, had retired, and he had opened up the training school where, Triple H and China and everybody knows that. But Vince Jr. still, Killer had made so much money for Vince Sr. and every other promoter in the world. He wanted to give him a job at that point, and he made him an agent, and he would have him sit at the monitor and make notes on the TV matches. And like, is the job guys are good or bad, or did the star do a good job of getting over, just anything like that. That's Killer's job, right? So I'm sitting there at one of the TV tapings watching the monitor one day, and I'm right next to Killer Kowalski. And he's got the toupee on by this point, and he dresses like, in that era, like a 1970s high school athletic coach, right? the button-down collar shirt and everything, and the long pants, but he's got that toupee on. He's got that incredible face, and he's got his notepad, and he's sitting there in his chair, and I look over, and he is sound asleep. And he starts, you can hear gentle snoring. And now I'm the only one that's really noticed. There's a few other people around, but I'm thinking, does anybody have the nerve to wake up Killer Kowalski? And just then, the goddamn bell rings to end the match. Ding, 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 ding. And that wakes him up, and he perks up, and he's seen none of this thing, right? He starts writing his notes. Good match. Kid has really improved. And after a little while, then he stopped doing that. And you didn't see Killer anymore on a regular basis. They still loved him, but they were getting notes that he had written in his sleep.
He is one of those names that everyone, especially in the Northeast, you heard growing up, even if your family weren't wrestling fans, was a name out there. One of the things I remember seeing when I was a kid, they aired the Letterman reruns, I think on Comedy Central, and they had from 82, when Killer Kowalski came on to show off his photography.
Yes. He was that was a hobby of his, was photography, but he took a lot of great pictures of the boys also, as well as, landscapes or, whatever other kind of photography he did. And then also he was mentioned in an episode of Seinfeld. Do you remember seeing that one?
The stomach claw.
Yes. Yeah. They're in the parking garage episode, I think it was. And Kramer's talking about Killer Kowalski. He grabbed people and he did the stomach claw.
And again, if it got in that script, that was Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David's script that came from a couple of guys in New York who knew Killer Kowalski, who probably weren't big wrestling fans.
Yeah. Well, the names, think about this: Bobo Brazil, Killer Kowalski, Gorilla Monsoon. What's some of the classic
Bruno,
names?
Bruno, even though it's not a gimmick name, that everyone knew, yeah.
Yeah, but those names, you knew those names because of the newspaper coverage, and the TV was everywhere, and even if you weren't a fan, you'd see the posters or, whatever, right? You remembered names like that. Not like some of the names that we've got these days, that's another reason I think we blew off NXT. Remember the fucking names? We couldn't even pronounce them. These are not names. They're just made up words.
When was the last time a wrestler was allowed to be called Killer on a major stage? Karrion Kross was Killer Kross, and WWE got rid of that. Killer Kowalski. Talk about names from that era. I wish I could have asked my dad, because he always said, I remember another guy named Buddy, and I would say Buddy Rogers, and he would say no, and I never even thought to say, what about Killer Buddy Austin?
Buddy Austin.
Killer Buddy Austin. He was a killer.
Well, yeah. But also Killer Khan. Worked for fucking right when Vince Jr. was taking over, he was still there.
Has there been just here is the killer?
What about could there be if there can be a killer now, could there be a maimer?
I think so, because I think maim as a word is out of step with contemporary culture, so I don't think people would know enough about it to understand what it is.
It could be like Maimer Mike Moraldo.
Mike Moraldo's going to get this gimmick, really?
Yeah, Maimer. Well, I like alliteration. But then if he was on AEW, they'd play the theme song from Maim for his entrance music.
You see, there's the problem. And it's nice to see you taking care of Mike Moraldo. Nice to see once you're managed by Cornette for all eternity.
You're always in.
You're always in.